families with a dog generally are more active. A dog particularly gets you up and out of the house to take it for a walk. And if you're going for a walk, chances are you're probably going to include your children. The current evidence definitely shows we all could take a few more steps in our life and get off our butt. And the scientific studies bear that out, that dog ownership, people who have dogs, they're just more active, and more active decreases some of those other problems in life that come from inactivity and sedentary lifestyle.
Interesting. So I decided to bite the bullet and follow through on something I've been wanting to do for at least 3 years: get a puppy. And although he may not always be very willing to do exactly what I want, it has been a blessing. So if you've ever considered owning a dog or getting your kids a dog, maybe you've wondered some things like, could a dog really be good for my family? And what do dogs really think? Maybe also, before getting a dog, what should I really consider? Well, these things are important. Get ready for a positively entertaining and educational episode, because joining us today is Jason Zackowski, an award-winning science teacher who inspires students through hands-on learning. And he's also the host of a top-rated podcast called the Science Pawdcast. But that's not all. Jason is also a dad dog and the genius behind Twitter's Bunsen and Beaker, which is a dog's take on the world around them. So if you're a dog lover and you're at all curious about whether you need a dog or another dog, you need to understand the science behind it, and we've got it for you next. Jason, first of all, thank you for being on the podcast today, and I love the fact that you're not only a science chemistry teacher for high schoolers, but you've also got this little side gig going with a podcast, a book, and obviously Twitter is a big piece of that. So let me ask you first and foremost, how do we see science through dogs' eyes? How is that possible?
So that's how our social media accounts got started, was on Twitter. I personified our Bernese Mountain Dog tweeting, but how would a dog perceive science or scientific facts slightly different than humans? And the big one is they're motivated by different things than we are some days. So I think if dogs became scientists, they would be way more concerned with how things smell and how things taste and how to get more of smells and how to get more food. So that's the idea there.
That's awesome. It's funny how you said usually motivated, because I know that we run into things where they're not so motivated too. They're more stubborn and more determined.
Yeah.
So with your podcast, then it must have been observations that you had that you were just writing down.
Yeah, the Science Podcast came about because as our account grew on Twitter, I felt limited by the Twitter characters. So I wanted to communicate science in a little bit more detailed way, and maybe not with the same kind of doggy spin. Yeah, so our podcast is more serious science with a very fun flavor to it.
I think it's really cool to make that connection, to see science through animals' eyes, just because I think that we lose that sense of wonder as we get older. And so part of me was really curious, now that you're doing this, are you starting to learn things actually from your dog?
Oh, huge. Before I started the Twitter account, and like we're on all social medias now, and the Science Podcast, I didn't really understand that much about pets. And from doing all the research, I've come to understand things a lot greater. But then also I've been a better dog parent to our dogs because I've understood their needs and how they experience the world so much different than humans. So it's a bit of two things. The dogs are all, your pets are always going to teach you life lessons, just like having kids will teach you life lessons big time. But also through the research to make a good show and good social media posts, it's taught me a lot too.
So tell me some of the things that have surprised you that you've learned, because I'm really curious about that.
I think you mentioned the sense of wonder, and just every time science looks into dogs particularly, we learn like absolutely fascinating things. There's two that come to mind real quickly. One is the occipital lobe and the olfactory nerves in a dog's, nervous system. They connect going towards the brain. So when a dog smells, there is every possibility that it makes a 3D picture of the smell because it's connected. If we smell apple pie, we're like, apple pie. But a dog smelling the apple pie would picture an apple pie and then be able to make a 3D image of where the apple pie is in space. And that's what makes dogs such great trackers. And then quickly, one other thing, a new study just came out that's really wholesome, where they had dogs and they came in with their human and they showed the dog, like the human went ball and showed the dog a ball, showed the dog a ball. And then they said rope and showed the dog a ball. And they had the dogs were hooked up to have their brainwave scanned, totally non-invasive. And the dogs were shocked and puzzled. So the words that they know made a mental image in their brain just like us. And it's the same shock and confusion that humans go through. If I'm like, hey, guess what? This is a frog. And I just give you my phone. You're like, no, that's a phone. That's not a calculator. Dogs do the same thing. So they're very different than us, but in some ways they're very similar.
That's really interesting. So I divulged this before we started. We have a puppy. We have a 13-week-old puppy. And yeah, yeah, I look like an acupuncture patient. My
Yep.
hands do. Yes, and
What type of breed is it?
it is actually a Portuguese water dog.
Oh man, those are not very common. They're very striking dogs.
Oh, he's beautiful. He's black with white markings and
Oh,
gray. He's actually a roan, which means that his fur will turn from white to gray over time. And so
oh.
any of that white is turning gray already.
Yeah.
And so I was cramming. We were having some issues with the whole acupuncture thing where I was, as soon as I put my
Yep.
hand down, there's a mouth.
Yep.
And so I was fascinated because I listened to a lady who said in the 80s, the training used to be you'd say no, you'd make that noise, you would tell them like these sharp sounds to shock them. And now the focus is on positive sounds and almost sing-songy types of redirects. It's like a distraction instead of a punishment. And so, of course, the first thing that happens is I listen to that and I start getting the gumminess, the mouthiness, and I say, I think I said, Pup. And he stopped and he just looked at me and I was like, oh, this is magical. Like he was so shocked by the fact that I wasn't responding in the same way that I had before. And it was positive that he actually came running over and I was like, okay, maybe this is what we need to do. So I think some of those things too, it's, you don't think of them having those emotional responses that they have. And yet they do.
Yeah, we can't necessarily fault old training because like that's what worked. Yeah, and with the whole mouthiness, Portuguese water dogs are retrievers, like they're water retrievers. So they're exploring the world with their mouth and your hand just happens to get in the way. And generally with dogs, positive reinforcement is far superior to punishment. But if a dog is chomping on you, you can go ow. Kind of scared them to stop.
And that just happens naturally, accidentally, where I'm
Yeah.
like, don't react. Oh, ow.
Yeah.
One thing that I also thought about with this, and this brought it all back. We had puppies when our kids were little. And I think that a lot of parents are very apprehensive to get their kids pets. And I think there's good reason. But
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I also think that there's so many positives that come out of pet owning, especially
Mhm.
dog owning. So would you agree? And if so, is there any science-backed evidence that's true?
So I'll start with the cautionary things first. A dog, particularly of all the pets you could get, requires the most amount of your time. So if you have kids, let's say you have a bunch of kids and they are in sports and every day you're going or whatever art or plays or girl guides or boy scouts whatever and you're like everywhere all the time and you're like never home, that you are not a good candidate for a dog. Needs your attention just like a person, just like a kid in your family. So yes, if you are very busy and you're like, I don't think we have time for a dog. If you feel that, you are probably correct because dogs need a lot of training and socialization, blah, 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 blah. But there are huge benefits to having a pet in your house. I think I can think probably of 2 or 3 sciencey things right off the top of my head. There is enormous evidence that having cats and dogs in your house, from a health perspective, decreases the chances of your child having severe allergies. There's a lot of evidence that shows that kids that are around dogs and cats just seem to have less severe allergies as they age. It could be an exposure thing. Your body could be constantly producing, having a histamine reaction, and your body's, wait a second, this is normal for us. And I don't want to say that if you have a dog or cat, you're invincible to all allergies and a bee sting isn't going to take you out later. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying the evidence shows that statistically there's less allergies. The other one is there's huge mental health benefits to having a dog as long as you have the time and patience, right? You could go down another path where it's a dog is or cat is not helping you. But if you have the time for an animal, dogs decrease anxiety, dogs increase the connectedness in your family. There's a stress hormone that we all produce called cortisol, and literally just spending time with a dog or a cat decreases that stress hormone. And then I think thirdly, you can talk about, I'm sorry. And then thirdly, families with a dog generally are more active. A dog particularly gets you up and out of the house to take it for a walk. And if you're going for a walk, chances are you're probably going to include your children. And I think the current evidence definitely shows we all could take a few more steps in our life and get off our butt. And the scientific studies bear that out, that dog ownership, people who have dogs, they're just more active, and more active decreases some of those other problems in life that come from inactivity and sedentary lifestyle.
Interesting.
So there we go. Sorry, a little bit long-winded.
No, that's great. I figured if anyone, the science guy would know. But I do think that, especially in families, like you said, that are super busy, if you
Mhm.
don't know, like you said in the beginning, if you don't know how much work it's going to take, it could be overwhelming. And so I
Yes.
do think you're right, like really
Mhm.
seriously researching the type of dog,
Yep.
researching the amount that dog's going to want to be outside. I was shocked with ours. I thought maybe we could keep it off the couch. I am losing that battle hard.
Yeah.
And I think if you had kids on the couch and you had other situations, it could get dangerous, just depending. But I do say that I have not spent so much time outside in the last 3 weeks,
Hmm.
despite the weather,
Yeah.
as I have since we've gotten him. And
Yeah.
he's a lover and gets along fairly well with the cats. I can say those things too. Yeah, great, great. What about raising a dog? And let's say you do have a family situation, you want this dog.
Mhm.
How is it similar to raising a kid? And what are some of the precautionary things that maybe we need to pay attention to early on and actually stop so they don't become issues later for the family?
Yeah, dogs aren't kids. So I'll say that right now. Like, I call myself a dog parent or a dog dad, but I'm absolutely not going to say that Bunsen and Beaker, our Bernese Mountain Dog and our Golden Retriever, are like our two sons. Like, they're just not. And if anybody tells you that, they don't know what they're talking about. So they raising a dog versus raising kids come with unique challenges. Dogs mature rapidly. Like, you've got a puppy, that puppy, did you say 13 weeks?
Mhm. Yeah.
Another 2 months, it's going to be an adult. Like, it will be an adult size. And puppies become adults very quickly. Like, that puppy stage is over in a blink of an eye. And it's hard, but it's so worth it. And it's so fun. Then, even though your dog is an adult, they are still a toddler. They still have the wants and the needs of a small child. Whereas when you have your own child, they stay little for much, much longer. You have kids, right? You mentioned like potty training a kid is a lot tougher than potty training a dog. I'm
It's
going to
true.
tell you right now, unless you're very lucky with your child.
So true.
And then your child becomes a teen. Dogs do become a teen and they have teenagey type behaviors. They get amorous with other dogs. You got to watch out for. They are a little less likely to listen to you, but that stage passes quickly. And for most of a dog's life, it's quote unquote an adult and stays pretty much the same right up until the very last day you have to say goodbye. And your child becomes an adult, and that is the same thing. So I guess what I want to say is that raising a child is exceptionally harder than raising a dog. There are way more ups and downs with raising a child than a dog. I guess I've heard people say that getting a puppy is a primer for having a child, and I can agree to that, but we're comparing apples to oranges.
Yeah. Yeah. We actually had two dogs before we had kids, and I thought raising a kid was much harder.
Oh, yeah, yeah, because a puppy stays a puppy for 3 months.
Yeah.
A baby stays a baby, and then it's a toddler, and you love your kids to death, but like they do toddlery things. And then the
Mhm.
teenage stuff hits, and that's a whole nother ball game as a parent. You're
So true. As far as your research has gone, have there
hmm.
been things that have really surprised you about dogs that most people wouldn't even realize? I know you talked about their brains and visualizing. I'm just thinking sometimes I think owners tend to think, okay, my dog's gotten to be a certain age. They're topped off on what they can learn, what they can do. The old you can't teach a old dog new tricks type of thing. Is that true? And if not, what has amazed you about what dogs are capable of?
You can always teach dogs new tricks. Like that's not true. Maybe their uptake is slower, just like us. I don't know if you said today, this is the year I'm going to learn a new language, and you try to do that, and it's near impossible as an adult. Whereas when kids are I'm in Canada, we have a French immersion stream, so kids can be immersed in French. They all speak French fluently. Both my kids were in French immersion, and they speak French fluently. It's the same thing as anywhere else in the world, especially your European kids. They pick up 5 or 6 different languages just because they're so close to different languages. Very hard for a random adult to just move to Europe and pick up 5 or 6 different languages. But you can do it, just like dogs. There is some truth to early socialization with dogs. That is super important. During COVID, when all of the puppy classes shut down and people were just inside with their pets and keeping themselves distant, that did definitely hurt the puppy stages in a lot of pets, because having socialization with different dogs and different people, there is a sweet spot for that as a puppy. And if your puppy doesn't get that, they can have issues later on socializing with other dogs or other people. That's a legit concern. And that is something that is a lot harder to teach an old dog. But you can teach an old dog a new trick, but the whole socialization thing is a little bit tougher.
And what happens if they're not socialized appropriately?
They can become reactive, I guess is the best way to describe, right? They can be reactive to other dogs. They can be reactive to other people. They see other dogs as threats. They see other people as threats because they're just not around them, knowing they're not. So early puppy play is really important. Early interaction with other people is really important. That socialization thing when a puppy's little is a big deal.
Very interesting.
Mhm.
Okay, there's so many pieces to being a pet owner.
Mhm.
I'm curious if you were to say somebody really wanted to be, again, like you were talking about, a better pet owner, a better
Yeah.
dog owner, what would that need to look like? Like, how would you progress from maybe knowing nothing or even having a negative experience and moving into a better relationship with your dog?
Yeah, so all dog breeds have very similar characteristics. There's a big study that came out that said like a Belgian Malinois and a corgi, they are almost essentially the same kind of animal, but some breeds do have breed specific traits. That's the first thing is before getting a dog, if you're looking for a specific dog breed, do your research and look at what their top traits are. So that's important. And number two, if you are getting a puppy, think about taking your puppy to puppy classes. You can always learn from the internet. You can watch videos. You can watch awesome TikToks about how to train your animal. But there's something about going to a reputable dog trainer and being in a group environment where there are distractions to get your dog to do the thing that you want. So that's number two. And then number three, focus on the things that could save your pet's life. And those three things are leave it. So your dog is getting into something that's poisonous, dangerous, could kill them. Leave it. Number two is recall. Please come back to me. If your dog squirts out the front door, I don't know how many we have really big social media accounts, and every week we see some heartbreaking post of a pet that squirted out the front door and got smoked by a car, right? through no fault of the pet owner. Like dogs are toddlers. The same thing could happen if you had just think about how dangerous your toddler's life would be if they could run like 30 miles per hour, right? Like how many toddlers would you lose in a year? Like 50% of them. Did your kids have no concept of danger when they were little? Ours did. Like,
You said relative. It was iffy.
like just think if a toddler could run 30 miles per hour, like how
Scary.
it would be a nightmare. And that's what you have to think about with dogs. They are very fast toddlers. And then the third one is think about things that would make your life focus on the skills that would make your life less stressful. Do you want your dog to have to sit in place when you eat? Do you mind having your dog at your feet? Do you want your dog to act a certain way when somebody comes to the front door? We rarely have visitors, so we didn't focus on that with Bunsen and Beaker, and they go bananas when we have company. So we never focused on that, and people come in and Bunsen and Beaker are like, hello, we love you, but not everybody likes that. So those are the three things. Focus on the basics, get your puppy to puppy class, and do a little bit of research on breed characteristics, but just keep in mind that a lot of breeds have the same characteristics.
That's awesome. And I appreciate the fact that you're telling them to look into it because I think too, we had a Great Dane and we got the Great Dane because he's going to be laid back. He's going to be so good with the kids. Our timing was bad as dog parents, because our kids were little and he was big and he was super excited to see them. And I can't tell you how many times they were on their butts on the floor because
I just body checked in the next week.
Yes. And that wasn't something that we had considered when we were planning out what this family would look like. Now later he did chill out a little bit more, but he was still really big and didn't realize it. So that was one of those pieces that you had to kind of plan in. But again, same kind of thing. Yeah.
Our burner is a big guy. He's like 100 pounds. He's not as big as a Great Dane. And he loves little kids. Like he loves them. He wants to follow them and protect them. And like a couple kids have hugged him and then he's just turned and they've got him flying, right? Like he's not jumping on them, but he'll destroy a kid if they move the wrong way and he moves the wrong way at the same time. So yeah.
Totally inadvertently, just out of natural movement.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't want to forget to ask you, I need you to tell us about your science podcast even a little bit more. And then you have a brand, a Bunsen and Beaker brand. So I got on there and picked out stuff for my dog. I was like, hey, they've got like dog gear. So talk about both of them because I think our audience would really appreciate it.
Yeah, so I'm the host of the Science Pawdcast, and the Science Pawdcast there's some weeks there's 3 episodes, some weeks there's only 2. We have a main show, which I break down a topical science news item, some research that's going on with pets, and then I interview an amazing scientist. Because we've grown so big, I'm so blessed to get the scientist on our show. So I ask them about what their science and some cool stuff that they study. And then we also get to talk about their pets. So it really humanizes these scientists. My wife and I also do 2 live shows a week, which I turn into podcast episodes. We do Pet Chat every Saturday. So if you're listening, you can join Pet Chat on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram. And it's at 6 p.m. Mountain Time, 8 p.m. Eastern. And that's where we just talk about the shenanigans that happen with Bunsen and Beaker. And then we invite our community to share their pet stories. And Tuesday, usually every second Tuesday, we have Science Chat, which is a live show. And either I have a science guest or my wife and I break down the 5 biggest science news items of that week with some doggy spin in there too. And yeah, the Bunsen and Beaker brand, we rate dogs. So I'll say that right now. We don't have millions and millions of followers, but Bunsen and Beaker on Twitter are probably the biggest science communication account, or X or whatever we're calling it today. And we have a website that's got really fun gear, and we have our book. No, I think we're sold out. Like just fun doggy merch. And yeah, I think there's some stuff for dogs, like bandanas and stuff on there. Yeah.
And people, lots for people too. In the house,
there's
I think.
there's tons for people. Yeah. We just launched, we will be launching probably when this comes out, our Rolling Bone magazine, which is a Rolling Stone spoof, because somehow through the stuff that's happened on social media, our golden retriever Beaker has a fake band called
Oh,
Vultures of Parliament. And I wrote real music that was produced, and we're on iTunes and Spotify. So we have two new songs coming out. One is called Second Breakfast, and the other is called Take Me Out. So I know it doesn't make any sense, but it's really fun.
that is awesome. That makes all the sense in the world. How fun is that? That's awesome. What is your website? Can you give them that?
Yeah, so it's www Bunsen Burner, but that's with an E, not the science equipment, the dog, Bunsen Burner BMD.com. BunsenBurnerBMD.com.
Perfect. Perfect. And they can probably find more about you there as well.
Yeah, we've got a little about us, contact us section, you bet. And if you search Bunsen and Beaker on any social media site, you'll find us, or you'll find the Muppets.
I forgot they were, yeah, that's right. Bunsen and Beaker for sure.
Yeah.
That is awesome. Is there any other advice that you would give future dog owners? Just like last parting advice.
Yes, I will give some hard advice. I wanted a dog when I got married and we had kids, but I knew that we didn't have the time because our kids were very little and they were very busy. And my wife and I were young teachers. So we were like never home. We had to trade. And dogs are very expensive. If something goes wrong with your pet, health wise, you're looking at thousands and thousands of dollars. So my advice is if you're looking to get a dog, make sure that you have the time and the money to afford it. Because a dog will give you back everything that it has. They are the most pure creature on earth. Everything that they have, they will give to you their entire life. And I think as pet parents, we have to make it worth it for them.
That's great advice. Great advice. No, thank you. Thank you so much. I feel like we need to pay you for your services today for the
Oh
advice.
no, it's fun. I love it.
I think it's great. And I hope that people will look you up and follow.
The Science Podcast is our main one, and then I just have different episodes in the feed.
Awesome. So plenty of opportunity to just reach out and be able to get more information from you.
Yeah, absolutely. Our DMs are open.
Fabulous. Jason, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Yay. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.